Welcome to our session on HyFlex teaching from what and why to sure we can. I'm Elizabeth Bennett. I have taught in a HyFlex model in my low intermediate ESL class since about January of this year.
And my name is Sadio Abdullahi, and I teach GED, paraprofessional, and citizenship class. And I have done HyFlex model since the beginning of the school year.
So in this session today, we will mostly be talking about how we figured it out, how we made it work this past school year. And then we will be sharing some resources with you throughout. And I just want to let everyone know we'll be going kind of fast and I won't be putting many links in the chat, but everything that we talk about is linked throughout in the slides and then also at the end of the presentation in the last few slides. The slides are in Sketch, and I'll also try to remember to put a link to the slides in the chat. We'll also try to leave a little bit of time at the end for questions and ideas about HyFlex teaching in your own context. And please feel welcome to use the chat throughout if you have questions or other ideas. So we wanted to start with a quick poll. And you'll just type a number 1 through 4 in the chat. What is your experience with HyFlex teaching? So 1 would be, I don't even really know what HyFlex is. Up to 4, I have a lot of experience teaching HyFlex. Thank you. I'm seeing lots of answers in the chat, lots of 1s and 2s, a few 3s and 4s. Okay, great. Well, thank you for being at this session. I would probably put myself at about a 3.5, honestly. I don't feel like I quite have a lot of experience with it yet, but we're doing the best we can. Just so everyone is on the same page, I wanted to provide you a definition of the hybrid flexible model. This is from an education writer named Brian Beatty. And he defines it as instruction that is simultaneously hybrid. So that's the high in HyFlex. So a combination of online and face-to-face, and flexible. So students can choose to attend face-to-face or choose to attend online. And then Sadia has another poll question for you.
We wanted to know, how do you feel about HyFlex teaching? Does it sound overwhelming? Does it sound like something that it's easy for you to do? Chat that in, A through D, and let us know how you're feeling about it. Lots of C's.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, yeah.
I'll say that a year ago at this time, I was totally at an A. I thought I had heard of HyFlex, and I just thought, that sounds like something that my poor forsaken colleagues in K-12 were forced to do because of COVID, but no sane person would ever think that this is actually a good instructional model. And now I'm just about to D. It's a lot of prep. There's definitely some extra work involved, but it seems like it's been really good for my students.
Yes. And since I came from K through 12, I really loved it. I think it's absolutely worth it. It's amazing. We're able to provide a support that I think a lot of times our students really need. And the reason we figured it out, I think me and Elizabeth, is because our school already had a hybrid model. Our schedule throughout the whole year last year was Mondays were always online. And then we have Tuesday through Thursday were in person. So the only thing that we added in was that extra piece where we made it hybrid and HyFlex, where we're teaching in person and online. Most of our students use MobiMax for extra practice, and a lot of the students as soon as they walk in the door, we teach them how to use Google Classroom. We teach them how to get their email. So right away, we are already teaching that piece. Like the first week, they should know how to log into their Google. You want to go to the next one? Again, a lot of support this has provided for our students. We have students that are working multiple jobs. Sometimes they're working overnight. So the work schedule is really demanding for a lot of our students. If they can just log on and attend classes online, it is something that I think they can take advantage of, and we still continue to see those students grow and learn. Another part is childcare. With COVID and all the shutdowns, there hasn't been a lot of daycare options. And then K through 12 schedule with conferences. A lot of our students have kids that are in K through 12 conferences is all day for some of the parents. If they can log in while they're, listening to their kids and watching their kids at home, I think it's been amazing. Transportation, illnesses, and COVID and quarantining, this has really provided a lot of support for our students. Our administrators have been on board, spending a lot of money on technology and helping us and supporting us. I feel like has been such an amazing thing that we're able to do this. Okay.
Yeah, I'm very grateful to all the support from Sadia and from my administrators in Burnsville, because that definitely made it possible.
For sure.
I'll talk to you a bit about some of the hardware that we've been using. So we were really fortunate at the beginning of last year. Every classroom got a new line smartboard, and you can use it in two ways. You can use it just like a traditional projector. You just connect your computer with a cable, and whatever's on your computer screen shows up on the smartboard. Or it also works as its own it has its own internal PC. So it works like a giant touchscreen computer, which is really nice. I've mostly used it in that way. And then the other piece of hardware has been owl cameras. And I will admit, when I first got an owl camera, I left it in the box for the first about 2 months because I just didn't want another thing to figure out how to use. And then I felt really sheepish when I finally took it out of the box and started using it, because it was so easy. Like I basically just plugged it in and started Google Meet and it worked. And this is nice because it shows the online students what is happening in the classroom. And it's not perfect, but it's pretty good at kind of zooming in on the person in the room who is talking. So it really helps the online students feel like they're part of the class. So how I would do it in my class, and sorry, the photos, I had to blur out my students' beautiful faces for the photo, but I would just launch Google Meet on my laptop using my school district account. And then I would use the new line as a separate computer and log into a separate Gmail account. Then I would join the Google Meet on the new line. So I had 2 Elizabeths in the meeting at all times. One on my laptop and one on the new line. But then the in-person students were able to see whatever I was presenting in Google Meet on the smartboard in the classroom. And then Sadia's set it up a little bit differently, so she'll talk about how she did it.
So for me, I just hooked the owl to the smartboard, and I could present from my computer, so I did not have to log into the smartboard at all. My keyboard would be my only source connected to the whiteboard. Because I have the owl, the students that are at home could hear clearly everything that we're discussing in class. And then the students at home could just speak like they're speaking on a Zoom meet, and we could hear it in the classroom. You could also record it. I had my volunteers online. A lot of the times for my GED volunteer, she never was able to come the whole entire year, but she would come on every Wednesday, and we would have her help with the writing process. And I could put her in a breakout room with one student, And then while she's working with that one student, I could still present, I could still teach the class, or I could have all the other students work on the writing process while she's with this one student. And as soon as the timer is off, they would come back, or she would text me, because we had cell phone, we had exchanged our cell phone numbers. She would text me, and then I would pull her back into the main meeting. But it was super helpful because everything that was going on in the classroom, my students could see.
So now we'll talk a bit about the kind of the apps or the software side of the technology. As we mentioned before, our school uses Google Classroom as our learning management system. And Sadia and I really like it. It's a really great way to send messages to students. You can post announcements in the stream, which is kind of like the homepage. You can use it as a place to assign homework, quizzes, TVM lessons. If you are using Google Docs or other Google apps, students can collaborate with their peers pretty easily on assignments. And you can post notes or videos or other resources there for students to access whenever they want. And that's especially been great for students who miss class.
Yeah. And all this stuff would be emailed. Anything that you would put on, like the post as an announcement, would be emailed. As long as they have their email linked to their phone somehow, anything that you post, if you say, hey, class starts in like 10 minutes, they will get that as an email. So instead of emailing individual students, this is one way to like reach all of your student in one time.
Mm-hmm.
I think there was a question in there.
I think someone was just wondering about Google Classroom, but we addressed it.
Yes.
Yeah, so Katrina, she's asking, did our administrators set up school Gmail accounts for the students? Yes. We were really fortunate. Somehow our administrators worked with IT, and basically when a new student is added in SID, they get issued a school district, so at 191.org email account, and then they use that for email and also to access Google Classroom. Sadia has linked a nice little handout if you're wanting to learn more about using Google Classroom in the slides. And then there's actually an entire self-paced course for teachers on how to use Google Classroom that I've linked there as well. And yes, Leah, I will put a link to the slides in the chat, and it's also in Sketch. And we won't be putting all the links in the chat, but they're all in the slides and in Sketch. So this is just an example of what my Google Classroom looked like. I kept it pretty simple. I mostly just posted Google form quizzes and class materials that we were working on. I think Sadia added a lot more in hers.
And I think one of the questions that was being asked is, the different grade levels. And I think that's the nice part about me and Elizabeth, because I had the higher level students and she had a lot of the ESL students, and you could still use all the platforms that we're mentioning with different levels. You could have your students that you print out your quizzes and practice stuff with your lower level students, and still have the books and materials that you need the higher level students, and they both can work. And that's the nice part about having this type of technology. You want to go to the next slide for Cami?
Yep.
And one of the things that I used on my Google Classroom was Cami, and Cami is an extension that you can just download. It's free. And I'm not selling it, we're not selling it, but it's really an amazing program that you could create assignments, and it links very nicely into Google. And I think if you had Schoology signed up, it will also link it there. So if you wanted to assign it to Google Classroom, or if you had a different platform through your school, it will work with both. The main thing that I used for Cami was that I would have my GED book, scan a couple of pages, and I could upload it. Even if I scan the whole entire book, I could cut and slice and like use specific number of pages that I need for that. Do you want to go to the next one? I think that's the picture. Yes. So I had this one, which is like 8-page lesson. And I scanned the whole entire book, but I could select from page, 20 to like page 30. And I could just post that one for my students on Google Classroom, which is really nice. And if you look at the side on the menu, you can directly create an assignment, and that goes to Google Classroom. I could share it with them. I could share it as a link. I could post it on my slides. There's so many things that you could do, and it will give you an option. Do you want to make it shareable to anyone, or do you want to make sure that it's only like your classroom? And as long as you change the access, you can share it to anyone, which is really nice.
Another app that we used was Google Slides. I found this really useful for warm-ups, just as students are joining the class, they can start typing a little bit in the chat, and presenting the day's objectives or learning targets, showing announcements, and anything that was really like teacher directed, where I just wanted to make a presentation. Google Slides were really nice for that. So this is one from my low intermediate ESL, and then this is an example from GED.
Okay. And for mine, I used links, and on the chat, someone asked, do they need to have an account? Oops. Do they need to have an account with Kami? And they don't. All they have to do is, if I share the link on Google Classroom, as long as they're able to get into my Google Classroom, they can have any of these links available to them. And it's because the way I share it, I make sure that they all have access to it. So that was a really good question. Oops, I think there's like someone who's unmuted. Yep. For mine, I would use the slides as like links that
that's cool. I just want to sit. Just want me to sit here?
I'm sorry if you were trying to mute people right now, but if you are not muted, could you please do so?
You like to go on the roller table?
Thank you.
And then Sadia, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Yes, I just noticed it.
Got it.
So I do have links embedded into my slides. So I use it a little bit different, and I can just have like the warm up, my everyday edits, my students can work on. And then if I have any other links like the science vocabulary words, I would click on it and they would be presented to the whole class. And that would be through Google Slides.
And then we also sometimes use Google Docs. This is a great way to create writing assignments in Google Classroom. One of the features I like is that the teacher can create a template document, and then you can set it so each student will get their own private copy of the document to edit.
Exactly. Or like I do, I have them collaborate. So I would have like a science lesson on there or social study lesson, and I'll say, okay, I need everyone to find one vocabulary words that they don't understand. And I would say, can you write out the vocabulary word? What is the definition? Or either use a sentence or a picture image from Google. And then I would have each student name on it so I know who did what. But it's a really nice way to collaborate. And like Elizabeth said, you could either make it individually assigned, or you can make it one document that they can all log in and work on.
Mm-hmm. And then really though, the app that I used by far more than anything else was Jamboard. This is just my go-to for worksheets, for notes, really anything where students need to write. I create a lot of my own worksheets in Google Docs, and sometimes I'll use PDF worksheets of stuff from other places. I usually print paper copies for the in-person students. And then for the online students, I create a Jamboard before class in my Google Drive. And then I just do a bunch of screenshots of the worksheet onto the Jamboard. And then that allows me to model completing the worksheet on the Jamboard during class. And then the nice thing about having the Jamboard in my Google Drive is that I can post it in Google Classroom afterwards for students to refer back to, or for students who had to miss the class that day. So this is just an example of what that looked like. The black text was the worksheet, and then I just wrote on it in different colors to model completing it. Sadia also used a Jamboard a lot, but she used it a little differently.
Yes, that's busy answering questions on there. One of the things that I used the whiteboard for was just actual whiteboard. So if we were working on math problems, I would start it up, and I would do this in the middle of the meet. So you can just go to the bottom tab where it has those little 3 different shapes, click on it, and then it would be just a normal whiteboard. I have my smart pen that I would write on, and I could solve math problems. If I needed to show a picture and I wanted to draw that, those are all the stuff that I could do through that. I didn't use it as like post-it notes, which you can actually do, and use it as a collaborating tool. As soon as I'm done, I would send it out to all the students. And if I knew some of my students were missing, you can just go to the share button and then add those students that are missing, and it would email them. So they could just keep it as notes, which was really nice for me to keep track of. I think the Cami question keeps coming back. You do not need to create an account for each student. As long as they have the link, they can click on there and they will be able to log into any of the stuff that we showed you. So they can log in and write on things, because those will be all done through Google. As long as they can log into Google Classroom, they do not need their own accounts. Sorry, go ahead.
And then Sadia was really fabulous about using volunteers in her HyFlex class, so she'll talk a bit about that.
Yes, so I had a lot of my volunteers were able to log online. I made them a co-host, a co-teacher, I should say. So on Google Classroom, I would add them as a co-teacher, and then they would just be able to do everything that I can do. They would be able to edit work. They would be able to like give feedback to students. My writing teacher, my writing volunteer was an actual teacher at a university. So I was very fortunate to have her, and she was able to like help students, give feedback. They were able to fix what the suggestions that she would give, and then send that back to her. And it was amazing because we can both collaborate with students, whether it was at home or in real life, which was really amazing. Our school actually did spend a lot of money on technology, because I have a whole Chromebook box that has, I don't know how many Chromebooks are in there, that we would share. And I think me and Elizabeth have that one that we can share because we're next to each other. And then there's another one. So there's a lot of technology available to our students, and they do get to check out technology also.
Mm-hmm.
And that's you use to get students to work.
Yeah, and I think we're doing well on time. So Sadia, you can talk a bit more about adapting materials and activities.
Okay, nice. Again, I use a lot with Cami. I can, scan my books in, and I can just work on that and have, if a student doesn't show up and I need to record that lesson, I would have the books scanned already. That would be the most time consuming part. But once you have it, it will be on your Google Drive. And all I need to do is just pick which ones that I need. I could split and merge things together as I need them to fit in together. I could use 2 different documents and bring them together, which is really nice. So as long as you have everything on Cami, there's a lot of different things that you can move around and adjust. As soon as I'm done with everything, I always put them in Google Classroom, so my students will have it either for reading, assignment, or to collaborate on. And they know what to do. They know how to click on it. Most of my students have been doing the hybrid function since school started. So we really get a lot of the questions out of the way at the beginning. And the students really help each other out on that. But you can assign work. You can do the reading on there. They can highlight, answer questions on the documents, and send it back to you, just like if you were to hand them a piece of paper, which is really nice. The next thing, I also use a lot of readworks.org. I assign work there. And the really nice thing about it is, again, it works really well with Google Classroom. So I would just sync my Google Classroom students onto ReadWorks account. And then as soon as I send the work, it will automatically post it on Google Classroom. So students can see, and it will email it, because anything that happens in Google Classroom automatically goes to their email. So it will say, okay, there was a read assignment that was assigned to you. And then if it's expired and they still do it, it notifies me and says, this person has worked on a work that has expired weeks ago. But you can differentiate work, you can assign different subjects. Since I have science, math, reading, all the stuff, I'm able to like find social studies reading or like science reading and assign it to them. I think if you want to talk a little bit about the time, because you can record that and get time for it too, right? For the ReadWorks.
Yeah, so ReadWorks is an approved distance learning platform. So when students work on it outside of class, and if they score, I think it's 70% on the quiz, then you can count it as distance learning proxy hours.
You know, it's amazing. It is a lot of work. We're not gonna lie, it is a lot of work. Once you figure it out, it is, you know, like, it is really nice that you can provide this service to all the students. And for our end, I think me and Elizabeth are such a like work bees that it really doesn't bother us that much, but it is a lot of work, the scanning, and once like that, last year was my first year. So this year when I go back and I'm still teaching the same classes, I have all those work already done. I have them saved. All I have to do is just click and present. So as long as I don't have the same students that come back, I have a lot of the work already scanned in. I have all that stuff done. So it's really nice to like get it done one time and plan for that. But our students really appreciate it. It is amazing that up to today, I still get notification that some of my old students are still working on the assignments that I signed up, like I assigned them like months ago. So the students really like it. And the nice thing is like if it's on their phone, which we help them download right away when they start school. We help them download Google Classroom, the Gmail. We have them download all that right away and have a short link on their phone so they don't have to like figure out, where do I sign up? Where do I do this? Where do I do that? We try to really help with that. Before I forget, another thing that I use is also formerly known as ESL Library. I find a lot of documents on that, and that the only bad part about that is that it doesn't really work well with Google Classroom. So I would have to print it, scan it, and again, use Kami to upload it. And yes, so Kami is a lot. I think like, I don't know what PDF expert is, but I think it's very similar to it. If you can scan and write on it and like highlight things, it's definitely the same thing. And again, with Google Meets, all I have to do is just present and it will have all that stuff presented. And I use some of this information that I find, especially for like argumentative assignments, I will find it from ESL Library, print it, scan it, and then have the students work on that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you offer HyFlex to pre-lit ESL classes?
So no, not really. At our site, it's been kind of teacher preference. The teachers who are who want to just dive right in and do it, we've been supported in trying it, but not everyone has tried it yet. And I think it would be really challenging for pre-lits or that level 1 and 2 ESL, just because, you know, those students are still learning how to read and write. They're learning the alphabet, and so to log into your email is very challenging. But not to say that it's impossible. I think other programs have have tried it. So it's possible. And speaking of differences in levels, I wanted to add that I am still very much using paper copies of materials. I provided paper copies of almost everything to students when they came in person. Most of my students preferred to come in person if they could, and they would just use online kind of as a backup option if they couldn't come to school for some reason. I'll talk about this a bit later. Another reason I relied on paper so much was because most of my students did not have computers at home, and it's so much harder to do, you know, annotating and writing and reading longer texts on a phone. So if you do have online students and you want them to be successful, you have to be very explicit about teaching them how to take their own notes. Or for my summer school class that was online, I mailed paper packets to everybody so they would just have the materials, and teaching students where to find resources in Google Classroom. Sometimes on my Jamboard, I would try to, you know, specifically give instructions for students. You don't have to copy everything when you're taking notes, but specific examples that were really key, I would tell them, copy this if you are at home. Yeah, I see. Okay, so Kelly has a question in the chat. What support from admin was most helpful for teaching HyFlex? Personally, for me, it was just just being supported, and my administrator telling me, you know, if it doesn't work, it's okay. Like, there's no pressure. You can try it. And I never felt like she was going to get mad at me if something didn't work. And it was, you know, I just felt appreciated for trying. That was the best for me.
Funny, Susan is in our meeting right now. You guys could directly ask her the questions.
Yeah. And Michelle has a question about challenges, and that's actually what we're going to talk about next. So we certainly had challenges. For me, one of the biggest ones was like what I mentioned before, that many or most of our students don't have computers to use at home. We do have loaner Chromebooks, and our program has made a lot of progress in having more devices available to loan out to students, but we still don't have enough for everybody. And it's just a fact of, you know, it's just a reality that it is much harder to switch between tabs or switch between apps on a phone, and then, you know, click on a link and then go to the link and do something and then come back to Google Meet. It was just a lot. And of course, every phone model is different. So, you know, I spent a lot of time trying to teach students to do things on their phones, and it's always a struggle for me. Another challenge that I had was I wanted to use a lot more songs and videos in my classes, but I wanted to provide support showing text to go along with whatever students were listening to. And in Google Meet, that seems to be quite challenging. I did find that if I wanted to display text on the screen at the same time as students were listening to a song, I could do it by embedding a YouTube video in a Google slide. And then I would share that Google slide to the meeting. But gosh, I don't even want to tell you the number of times I would play a song and get a minute into it, or maybe even all the way through it, and then students would tell me, we couldn't hear it. So I had a lot of those epic fail moments. And then probably my biggest epic fail was the day, how dare I tried to go on my son's field trip and had a substitute teacher. And I got this text message from one of my students because I had told them, you know, I had spent hours preparing and writing out all these instructions that, you know, there will be online class tomorrow. You just like normal, you can choose to come in person or online. And then I think I had 4 students who tried to attend online. I saw it in the attendance report afterwards, but the in-person substitute wasn't able to make it work. So there was no online class that day. I linked here some example substitute teacher instructions that I figured out after this incident. What I think the problem was that our substitute was not using her district Google account, and that made it difficult for her to run the Google Meet because it was all through the district account that I had set up the link. So just if possible, double, triple check that all logins and all links work, not just for you, but also for your substitute.
I think some of my biggest challenges were having students like share images, or like they would say, I can't find something. And I would say, can you show me on your screen what you're seeing? And I think there's an attachment on the resources that I made of how to share your screen. So I just, in the middle of class, I'm like, okay, I'm going to take quick pictures of this and then just show you guys so you see how to share your screen, and then I can see where you're at, so you're not stuck somewhere and then the rest of the class is continuing on. I double check. One of the things that I like about the online teaching is that, like I said, the documents that we're working on, I know exactly who's writing. I know who's in there. I know what they're working on. If they're not logged in, I ask them where they are. And then if all else fails, I email the document and I tell them, go to your email, click on that document, and then you can use that document. But it is really hard, teaching, reteaching. And as long as you don't give up, a lot of the students pick up, because one of the things that I noticed is even if they don't speak a lot of English, a lot of people have cell phones. A lot of people use technology. They might not use it in English, but they know how to log into things. They know how to log into their social media. And I think if we use that as, like a resource or a scaffolding strategy and say, hey, do you know how to log on to Facebook? Yep, you know how to log on to to our, Cami or to Google Classroom. If they can do Snapchat, I think they are able to do this and upload, photos and films and all this stuff. They're able to do the stuff that we're doing in class. And it's so much helpful because all of our students are parents and they have to email their teachers and all this stuff. So it's really been really helpful. If you can teach them the first couple of days, it is really helpful. And that actually also helps with the Chromebook coming back, because we have all of their emails. We know that they're getting the emails through their phone, and we don't have to worry about if their cell phone is disconnected. We have a way to access that student. And I think that's one of the things that is really important about having an email that they know how to log into.
So we'll just talk a little bit about what we're planning to do this coming school year.
For me, I will continue teaching HyFlex model. Works out really well. I think if I didn't have that HyFlex model, I would not have a lot of students, because most of my students either left the district and moved to outside of the district, and they will continue to log in. Some of them didn't have daycare. And because of the service that I provided, I think a lot of them stayed on. It provides a lot of flexibility. And I think that communication that I mentioned earlier with the Chromebooks coming back, you have a way to communicate with your students. You have a way that without you having to pick up a phone and call 20 students, you can send one message that will reach all of them within minutes. So I think it's an amazing tool. Again, a lot of work, but it is definitely worth it. And one of the last questions that we wanted to ask, do we have time? Oh, if we don't have time, it's okay. Go ahead.
Oh, it's okay. No, I just wanted to say quickly, I too am planning to continue teaching HyFlex because it really has helped my students persist in their attendance when they have childcare or transportation or work or whatever challenges. My big goal for HyFlex this year is I'm going to try to use less paper. I want students to develop some more digital resilience. Like Sadia said, you know, students are using often email on their phones, probably not the district email, but other email. They're texting, they're using WhatsApp and Snapchat and everything else. But you do have to explicitly teach how to use your phone for classwork, because there are similarities, but there's also a lot of things that are different. And of course, not all students are using their phones in the same way. So we are fortunate to have class sets of Chromebooks. So my grand plan is to get everybody using the Chromebooks when they are in person in class, at least the first few weeks of school. I think most of my students will be attending in person. And then I want to also be explicit about teaching phone skills, because since students already have phones, I want to make sure they can do as much on their phone as possible. And then really try to prioritize the Chromebooks that I issue to my students. Those really need to be going to the students who are mostly going to attend online, so that everybody, whether they come in person or whether they're at home, they have an appropriate device where you can actually do academic things online. And I'll just put in a very quick plug. There is a new North Star Digital Literacy Foundations course for teachers. It's linked here in the slides. If you're wanting to learn more about how to teach digital literacy and how to integrate it into whatever you are already teaching. And we do have just about 3 minutes for discussion. So you can, it's probably easiest if you can type in the chat since we have so many people, but maybe we can have 1 or 2 people unmute themselves and speak also. Yeah, Heather, that's interesting. Heather says they had an experience where 1 student showed up in person and there were 12 online. That's kind of the opposite for my class, but I think it's very level dependent. I think maybe at the lower language levels, especially, students really prefer that in person. But then as they become more proficient in English and digital literacy, online becomes more convenient for them.